We should say that actually, Tom, that we're live streaming.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Join us for a new education and discussion series.
Hello, everybody who's joining and in the process of joining. We still have people in the waiting room, and while we still have people in the waiting room, I am going to just hold off doing a sort of formal introduction and perhaps ramble semi-incoherently until such time as everybody's kind of turned up. All right, this seems like it might be an all right place to start. Okay. Hello, comrades. Hello, allies. Hello, perhaps internal opponents, which is fine and good. Welcome to The Devil is in the Detail, which is the debate about how the founding conference of your party should function, what it should look like. We are live. We are live streaming, which is as good as a reason as any to be comradely and polite to one another. In terms of housekeeping, I might interject at times. I'm the chair, my name's Tom, and I might interject at times on behalf of attendees if somebody perhaps uses like a bit of a wonky term or a word that's a bit niche, or indeed to remind speakers to stick to their allotted times and to let them know that how much longer they've got left. There will be a break and an opportunity also for attendees to chat amongst yourselves, but also to ask questions from the virtual floor. If I could ask people to use digital hands, please, for interventions. I think that's it in terms of housekeeping. I don't think there's much more to say other than there has been a sort of a translation of the waffle on the Your Party website prepared. The way it's been explained to me is that as of this moment, the 6 MPs and their teams will produce 4 documents that are going to be agreed at the launch conference. There's going to be a constitution, rules for the party, a political statement, and a strategy document. At the moment, branches can't move any amendments or motions. At the moment, regional meetings in September or October will discuss the 4 documents, but don't have voting powers currently. There is an online platform where the documents will also be published and members can comment, and a composition process will take place somewhere and by somebody. At the moment, my understanding of it is that sortitioned delegates will only be able to move actual amendments and only at the conference itself. And at this stage, it's not clear whether they will have a vote or not. Online, it's 1 member, 1 vote in terms of all members to ratify the 4 documents. I hope that's correct, and I hope that's reasonably clear. If it's not, perhaps it can be sort of like clarified later on in the meeting, but for now, I'm going to just sort of hand over to the first speaker. So Tina.
Thank you, Tom. This is hopefully the first of a number of discussions around various issues to do with your party. I'm hoping anyway. I think it's no exaggeration to say that we have the opportunity of a lifetime here to build a truly democratic, socialist, mass working class party. By working class, I mean everybody who has to sell their labor power. A party that can hopefully present a viable alternative to the rotten, destructive capitalist system, and don't we need it? I am very enthusiastic about the project, I should say, up front, which is also why I'm very critical. I wanted to succeed, but I think we've all seen over the last few weeks that there's a real danger of things being messed up. And I'm afraid the plans for launch conference are very much part of this slow motion messing things up. I think there are very many people, no doubt, and I have no doubt about it, who, like Roger, who want to support, for example, sortition, i.e. a lottery system to choose participants for the launch conference. They do so out of a genuine desire to democratize the left, our organizations on the left. And my God, don't they need a democratization? They need a cultural revolution, actually. And I do think sortition could be useful in some cases for perhaps a future society where the majority of people run things collectively. I call it communism, you can call it something else, where we just, sort of various things could just be administrated, perhaps. Sortition is a useful tool for that. In the jury service, obviously, it's useful, and by extension, perhaps appeals committees in our own organizations could be organized by sortition, chosen by sortition, i.e. like a jury of your peers who will hear the case and then decide yes or no. I would argue, though, that when it comes to a conference, and particularly the launch conference of a political organization that should be discussing and developing our policies, our constitution, our rules, it is not only entirely the wrong tool, it is also a very harmful tool. And I fear it's been chosen precisely for that reason. I don't accept the argument that there's no time to do it any differently. We have to do this now. It's only 2 months to go. Can't have elections. The membership portal could have been launched months ago. Even now, there's still enough time. Or push conference back. I think sortition, the lottery way to choose participants, concretely now in the context of the rest of the launch conference plans, they certainly allow a wide participation, which I know is Roger's things, but I think it's actually way too wide, too far a participation. 13,000 delegates, so-called delegates, are going to be at launch conference. I think it's going to be very difficult to have any meaningful discussion, debate there. I think that actually having that many people there does not aid the thrashing out of different ideas, different views of what our working class party should do, how it should fight for what policies. It stops those things. And this is where I want to look at the conference plans in a bit more detail. And I've got a little plan. Tom already highlighted some of the things, but I think it's useful to look at them in a bit more detail. So the 6 MPs will produce those 4 documents. Now let's think about who those 6 MPs are. There's Jeremy Corbyn, there's Sarah Sultana, who's been frozen out. The other 4 are good pro-Palestine activists. Are they socialists, though? I think that's a useful question to ask. Are they working class? What kind of documents do we think they will produce? It's important to say that these documents are the basis for everything. We, as members collectively at the branches, we have no chance to put anything forward. There's no motions can be put forward, no alternative documents on strategy, program, etc. are allowed. Those 4 documents will then be discussed, not voted on, at about 20 regional meetings with 2,000 to 5,000 people at each. 20, do the math. If you can get that many people together. I don't think it's going that great at the moment, the membership drive, understandably. They're also going to be discussed an online portal that allows all members to comment. Again, do the math. There's going to be tens of thousands of comments, amendments being put forward, etc. All these notes, tens of thousands, notes and comments will then be composited somewhere by somebody. Some amendments might get accepted, some might be put up as options that you can click ABC. Most will have to be disregarded for time and space reasons. At conference then itself, conference participants, I don't call them delegates, I think they're participants, are chosen by weighted sortition a couple of weeks before conference. As I said, there'd be 2 sets of 6,500 delegates. So you can't even be there for the whole weekend. You can be only there for 1 day. So you don't even participate the day before. How will yesterday affect tomorrow, etc. And there's huge questions with that. only those participants, those at the conference, will be able to move actual amendments to the 4 documents. Their names presumably will not be made public beforehand. They have no possibility to cohere in that short period of time, to, for example, put forward joint amendments, etc. And if each delegate only moves 1 amendment, well, do the math, 13,000. Who chooses between those amendments? There's a conference arrangements committee that's going to be extremely powerful, and I think that's a real problem. At or after the conference, we don't quite know that yet, all 4 documents will be put to an online poll of all members. It's called a 1 member, 1 vote, OMOV. Presumably they're allowed to say yes, no, or abstain on whatever the conference decided. That could in theory overturn what conference had chosen. In reality, it's likely to be a ratification, I suspect. I should say OMOV, 1 member, 1 vote, of course, in the branches, in local branches. That is, of course, the most democratic way we all organize, naturally, absolutely. At a conference of thousands of people, I think that becomes a problem. I think it should be, OPOV is, I think, how Marx has called it. I think that's a good one. 1 participant, 1 vote. People at the conference should be able to vote. Sitting at home alone, you're not going to follow everything in detail as the participants will be at conference. You go to the toilet, you cook dinner, etc. You will have missed stuff. I don't think you can have a meaningful decision making sitting at home. I think it should be up to the people at conference. Then I think that leads to a democratic deficit, and atomization is a huge one. The combination of sortition conference participants and OMOV online voting means that members act as individuals who are chosen because of an accident of their birth, ethnicity, etc., rather than because of what they actually want to argue for. They can't, as I say, cohere with other participants. They're not accountable to anybody. They're there as themselves, only their conscience, like MPs. There's no role for the branches or for members to prepare collectively for the conference. And collectivity, that's a huge problem. I think collectivity is the basis of our vision of socialism, isn't it? We want to run things together. We want to discuss. We want to come to conclusions together. We want to debate. We want to organize together. And I think that way of organizing is exactly the opposite of what we're trying to achieve. And the way we organize now, I think, gives a glimpse into the kind of future we are building. Well, we can't not comment on this question, which has recently come up, the proposed ban of a double membership of parties. There's different formulations have been used by Corbyn and the website, etc. I find it deeply worrying in any case. Is it a way to keep out just Green Party, Labour Party members, or is it a way to keep out the organized left? I think we've had really enough experience with bans and proscriptions under, Keir Starmer, etc. It's not that long ago that thousands of us were kicked out. We should have nothing to do with that. We should oppose that right from the start. In fact, we should openly say, we want to unite the left openly. They should be able to form platforms and factions. They will be there anyway. I'd rather know why that person's talking rubbish, because he's a member of ABC. It's much better to do these things openly and democratically, transparently. Meaningful unity with a culture of where we can discuss differences rather than try to shut people up. And I don't mean federalism. I don't think that's a good idea. No to, I think little fiefdoms here and something else there is a recipe for disaster. We do need a unified national party, but one that allows differences. So this structure, I think, is good for the bureaucracy. They can choose who speaks, they can choose the amendments. People are able to say yes or no, and that's it. The sharpest arguments, the best speakers, the biggest fighters, the most, the best campaigners are probably not going to be there, which means there's going to be very little opposition to anything those 5 MPs might have come up with, because Zara is not involved in this, we should remember. Members are all atomized, not organized collectively. And we should
comrade.
Oh, okay, I'm wrapping up. So OMOV Momentum's coup was organized via an OMOV method, and that is a problem. I have one more slide. Sorry, I quickly run through it. What's the alternative is, I think, democratically branches elect their delegates via single transferable vote. They're accountable to the branches are involved. Everybody is involved that way. That's the only way to make sure everybody's involved, either as a delegate or as a voter of delegates, with regional things
I'm
to
gonna have to cut you off.
vote,
Sorry,
etc., etc.
All right, that seems like a good place to leave it. All right. Next up, I believe, is Max. Is that right? Or is it Roger? I do apologize.
It's Roger.
Oh, sorry, Roger. Please forgive me. Okay, Roger, over to you.
I think my ability to unmute myself is taken away from me there. Anyway, hello everyone. It's very nice to be invited to make a contribution to this very important debate. I'm aware I've only got 10 minutes and I've got at least 20 minutes of things to say, so I don't really know how I'm going to manage. So apologies if it's a bit fast and incoherent, but I think there's going to be a bit of a debate around it, so hopefully I can fill out some things. I'm very aware that Tina sort of talked about the nuts and bolts of this particular situation, but most of what I want to say is about matters of principle, which isn't to say that the context isn't important, as I'll hopefully have time to come on to. But I want to start by referring people to a debate between Foucault and Maoists in the late 60s. And some of you may know the book Power Knowledge by Foucault, which I read as a rather brain nerdy teenager. But in this debate in the late 60s, the Maoists were very keen on the idea that they'd created people's courts, and they were extremely revolutionary people's courts. And Foucault made a slightly devastating or amusing observation that courts are fundamentally a bourgeois institution. And as many of us have found out in recent years. And so the very concept of using a court is anti-revolutionary and reactionary in his rather provocative style. And what he referred to, of course, was that you need to have a different way of resolving conflicts, which didn't involve a bourgeois sort of mechanism. So my broad point here, I suppose, is that revolutionary practice over the last 200 years has rather unfortunately got caught up with the supposed objectivity of parliamentary and electoral paraphernalia, which is ideologically and empirically connected with the rise of the liberal bourgeoisie and the capitalist class. In other words, modern democracy, in inverted commas, i.e. elections and voting and parties, were formed at the beginning of the industrial age and modern capitalism. And there's no coincidence, because fundamentally what voting and elections do is create competition, supposed free competition, in an allied way to the free market. And we all know, obviously, that that's a lie, because if you have a free system, in inverted commas, then it's a license for the rich and powerful and special interests to dominate the process. And I think, getting back to sort of core principles, I think socialism obviously has a whole bunch of definitions, but maybe a good enough definition is the belief in the fundamental equality of human beings, that people are fundamentally equal regardless of their talent, regardless of their class, their race, their background. And therefore, the revolutionary logic of sortition is that no person should have a more beneficial right to represent their community than another. And that leads on to the obvious proposition that people should be selected randomly so that selection cannot be corrupted by class interest or special interest. So obviously, like, that's a pure principle, about a bit like the pure principle that the means of production should be collectivized, for instance. And there's lots of, ins and outs of it. But I suppose my core proposition is that we shouldn't reject sortition because of contextual sort of drawbacks. What we should do is make sure that sortition is effectively supported within a context, if you see what I mean. Like in the good old days, people used to say democracy won't work because it will fall to bits, and maybe it would because it wasn't properly supported. But all radicals and revolutionaries in that time would say, well, that's not a reason for not having democracy. It's not a reason for going back to aristocratic rule. It's a reason for making sure that democracy works properly. And I think Marx may be saying something about this. In other words, what I'm trying to say is the argument here should not be against sortition in the context of your party. It should be to make the context supportive of sortition, if you see what I mean, rather than going backwards to what is a fundamentally revisionist and reactionary mode of making decisions, i.e. elections and voting. So moving on to a sort of more applied sort of points, I think everyone is probably aware that at least since the 1970s, working class representation in political organisations and in parliaments has massively reduced. I think it's under 5% for most national parliaments. And so if we have sortition, then the bottom 50% of the population, the people that Tina was talking about, the people that have to sell their labour, would automatically have 50% of the power in an assembly. And so for me, like, there can be no debate around whether socialism should support sortition or not. Socialism is sortition if we believe that the working class should be represented equally along with other, proportionate to their population. And needless to say, other things being equal, which are no doubt sometimes they're not, but other things being equal, having that representation of the poor and the working class, depending upon what words you use, is going to have a massive impact upon the structure of power and social arrangements. So I just want to say, I'm going to run out of time on that, but I will say, in case people aren't aware, that from the foundation of Athens through to about the 1830s, the definition of democracy, in other words, what democracy really means, which is rule by the people, i.e. not rule for the people, but by the people, that was always associated with sortition, lottery systems. All the political theory up to the beginning of the 19th century rather, was clear about that. So a classic historical example, for instance, is when the founding fathers supposedly instituted democracy, i.e. voting in elections after the American Revolution. They were actually utterly opposed to democracy, which is why they wanted to have voting elections so that the worthy, otherwise known as the ruling class, would actually dominate those elections, which of course they've done ever since in the United States. So we need to sort of get our ducks in a row in terms of the wider history of what democracy is. Democracy is not elections and voting. What elections and voting are, as it was for 2,000 years, is oligarchy and aristocracy.
Got a minute, Roger.
So I'll talk more about these things, but I want to just make a few points about this particular context. So I think the first thing I think we need to, put to one side is some sort of reactionary notion that because it's always been like this, it always has to be. So hopefully we don't have to argue with that, right? Tradition is good in and of itself. But I think the things that we need to focus on is making sure sortition at this conference works well. And I think Tina's rightly pointed out some of the things which make it not work so well. which, as I said, doesn't mean that sortition is bad. It means that sortition isn't enabled to work properly. In particular, there obviously has to be time for people to deliberate, because deliberation is, the way in which people come to decisions. Secondly, there needs to be a pluralism of presentations, which arguably there isn't going to be, but in which case we need to make the demand that there is. And thirdly, the people, i.e., who are now going to be mostly working class, are going to need to have the power to initiate their own amendments and their own proposals, in which case they need time enough to do it. So those are the things which give us the agenda, as it were, as progressive revolutionaries, as opposed to reactionary revolutionaries, dare I say it. What we need to do is to focus on making sure that the fundamentals of open debate, discussion and deliberation can happen at the conference.
Are you done?
And if not,
that'd be a great place to end.
Yeah, I've just said my provocative endpoint is if not, then there's a great tradition of direct action, which maybe you shouldn't go into.
Well, you have extensive experience of it, though, Roger. Right, thanks for that, Roger. Our next speaker is Max Shanley. You need to unmute, mate, or somebody needs to unmute Max.
Oh, he is unmuted.
Oh, can you hear me now? It's lovely to see you.
Hang on. Can somebody just give me a thumbs up if Max is a bit crackly, or is
Crackly. You have to put your microphone in a bit better or something.
Can you hear me now?
kind of, but like it's still a bit crackly.
An external microphone. Can you push it in a bit harder or something?
Give us.
Yeah, it's all right. We haven't started timing yet.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I mean it's the same old, mate. It's very crackly. Have you got Bluetooth headphones? Because you were fine earlier, or are they plugged in?
I've got Bluetooth headphones in, but I've swapped the microphone to my webcam's microphone because you said
I reckon, swap it back to where it was. Sorry, don't panic. We've allowed for this, a few little mishaps.
Right, can you hear me now?
Well, I mean, we can. It's the same. I think we might just have to sort of like forward your head if there's no sort of...
2 seconds. Give me 2 seconds.
No problem. Yeah, somebody in HO in the chat has just suggested just reconnecting, which I think is what...
Can you hear me now? I had a fan on.
No, it's just... I mean, we can hear you. It's sort of very crackly thing.
I'll disconnect and reconnect. Give me 2 seconds.
So it's the microphone rather than the headphones, I'm guessing.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, but yeah, same problem. I think let's just go for it, mate. I don't think we can...
Okay, I do apologise, everyone. I do apologise. This hasn't eaten into my time, is it, Tom?
No, of course not.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Well, great. So, it's lovely.
Can we try maybe switch off your video if that makes a difference? It's really hard to follow you.
What about now?
Oh, it's the same. Sorry.
I do apologise. There's nothing I can really do about that. I was fine a minute ago. Anyway, I'll begin now. So, it's for those of you that can actually hear me, it's lovely to see you all here on Friday night. I assume you'd all be busy off down the pub or something, but you decided to give us some of your time instead. So, before I talk about what my proposal is exactly, I think it's probably right to respond to what Tina and what Roger have said. So I'll start with Tina first, if that's all right. I, in general, believe in delegates, right? Elected delegates, elected from party branches who are then sent to the conference, and that's how decisions at the conference are made. And the reason why I believe that is because when you have delegates elected by all member meetings, then actual deliberations can take place, strategic options can be presented to members, and you undergo a collective process of political education. The problem is that at the moment we don't have an effective branch structure, right? We have various different proto-branches that have been launched all around the country, which are all fantastic now. But the problem you've got is that none of these proto-branches are being given the data on the members in their areas, and they're also very patchy. So as a result, it's very difficult to claim that they would be in any way represented. Now, then you've got, on the other hand, you've got what Roger's proposing, which is the use of sortition. I don't know if Roger just thinks the use of sortition should be for the founding conference, or whether we should be using sortition in general. But the problem with sortition that you've got is that without a serious proceeding political education process, where ideas can be debated, strategic options placed in front of people, you end up in a situation where those who are going to be attending the conference, which if what Tina says is true, which I no doubt that there's going to be 6,500 delegates a day, but you only get to spend one day there. I mean, look, I'm not being funny. Whoever proposed that either did so incredibly disingenuously, which I think is most likely the case, or they smoke about half an ounce of crack a day, because it's a just completely nuts idea. And so we're going to end up going to this conference with people who aren't going to be fully informed about what they're going to be voting on, right? I believe, and I'm sure Tina believes this, and I'm sure Roger believes this, that every cook should govern. But the problem with a straight system of sortition is ultimately it's like giving a gourmet chef early learning centre kitchen and saying, right, I need you to make us a meal that will get us a Michelin star.
I'm really sorry, Max. Now you can't hear you at all anymore. I do wonder if we should. Is your microphone? Somebody said your microphone was maybe on too high or something. It's gotten really bad, the crackle. Yeah, and lots of people can't really hear.
I paused it just for the record. I think
might you be able to join with your phone?
Yeah, can do. Give me a minute.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Max.
You're crackled as well now, Tom.
Oh, really? Okay, that's an odd one. I might be able to do something about that. Is that any better, Tina?
Yes, maybe somebody said maybe it was Max's crackling over you or something. I don't know.
All right, can people hear me now?
Yes, oh good.
Somebody give me a wave if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Is it crackling still, Roger? It's only really, it's great. Okay, right. Put it through my spruancy microphone, so it should be okay now. Jordan attributing this to MI5. I think that's almost, yeah, it's almost, yeah. As somebody else is now just saying, obviously, yeah. I think we can blame the security services on for this one.
For sure.
We paused Max at 3 minutes 31.81 seconds. So if anyone is a maths nerd and can work out precisely how much longer he's got, then good for you. we are, after this little interruption, going to move to a sort of a more free-forming debate between the three main speakers. After that, and this will be a bit later than advertised, there's going to be a little interval, and then some breakout rooms during which you can either talk amongst yourselves in little breakout rooms, or you can just go and make yourself a cup of tea, attend to any children or pets that you might have that need attending to, but also reflect on whether you might change your mind on anything off the back of contributions so far. Reflect on whether there might have been some wonky kind of academic terms that might need clarifying, and generally just discuss what your thoughts so far might be. After that, we are going to go to a Q&A from the floor. Hello again, Max. I think he's just sort of coming back. Which will be moderated by me, and then we'll have some closing remarks. Obviously, all of this is going to be a little bit later than usual, but let's see if we can hear Max a little bit better now.
Can you hear me now?
He might need unmuting if tech support could do that. There we are. I can see him again. All right, Max.
Yeah, tremendous.
Can't hear you at all now.
You can't hear me at all now.
No, not a
I can hear
minute.
him. Yeah, I can hear him.
Jake can hear him. Why can't I hear him?
I can hear him.
Well, I mean, it doesn't actually matter too much if I can hear him or not. I don't know why I can't. But yeah, let's go from where you were, Max. So you've got about 6.5 minutes, mate.
Wonderful. So basically we find ourselves in a situation where we're going to have 13,000 people going up to Liverpool for this conference, and the overwhelming majority won't have a Scooby-Doo what they're actually there for. And I think this is probably deliberate more than anything, because let's face it, Jeremy Corbyn, the Gaza Independents, and Zara Sultana are not all going to be sitting around a table drafting these documents. It'll be a whole gang of unaccountable, essentially bureaucratic figures, or really people who would like to be bureaucrats in the party moving forward. And so in that context, straight up sortition is perfect for them, because it allows them to essentially present a fait accompli to the sortition delegates, saying, "Oh yes, this is what we propose, and isn't it more democratic?" And da 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 da. But by all likeliness, from everything that we can garner from the very few almost non-existent statements that they've made publicly, what they're really going to be presenting is either a Labour Party Mark II, which really at this point is like Labour Party Mark 76, something like that, because various different groups have tried Labour Mark II before, with a party that's a little bit more democratic, but no less bureaucratic than the existing Labour Party, or a sort of federal arrangement. And neither the Federalists or the Labour Party advocates have actually publicly made the case for their position at all. I think the reason why, in particular, the Federalists haven't is because essentially what they're calling for isn't federalism at all. It's feudalism. They want a coalition of local fiefdoms that they can control and that they can be the bigwigs of, and so they can cosplay as mass politicians. So they have no intention whatsoever of recognising these branches. And as we've already discussed, it's hard to claim that they're particularly representative of the 800,000 people that have signed up to the party main list, because they won't share the data, right? And they'll use ridiculous reasons like Data Protection Act and everything like that, but that's bollocks. We all know it's bollocks. So we can't have straight up sortition because, as we've said, people will be going into the conference extremely uninformed about what they're actually voting for, and they will most likely take those 6 MPs as acting in good faith, particularly due to, and let's face it, the cult of personality around Jeremy Corbyn, his supporters in particular, mainly the people around Collective, seem to have raised him up to the level of the divine and demand that we all worship him. But he's just a man like any other, and no one's perfect. So what I've proposed is a kind of midway point between the two, which is sortition plus. I'd admit it's an entirely opportunistic proposal. I wouldn't have proposed it in normal times. Normal times, I would have been on Tina's side. But what sortition plus essentially entails is that you would have a pre-registration period for factions, like pre-conference factions, and they would put forward essentially what would be party lists of candidates and a political platform as to what they stand for, what amendments they're putting forward, their vision for the party, and so on. And then all registered participants, which is now obviously going to be the number of people that have joined the party as members, would then vote using Scottish STV, which is STV under the Droop quota, for those lists. And those that are elected by them would be factional observers with speaking but not voting rights. And the benefit of this is that you get the pros of sortition, which is obviously that, you know, it'll be a very representative conference, but you also get the sort of opportunity for our best fighters, our best speakers, our best organisers to be there on the conference floor. At the moment, I think it's very unlikely that they'll do a 180 and support delegates. It's just not in their interest, right? We might be able to get sortition plus through, simply because I believe without it, the conference, it wouldn't be a conference. It wouldn't be a working political event. It would be a jamboree, and it would end in most likely the coronation of Jeremy Corbyn, which is what his supporters want. They want him to be king of the party. And what everybody here is fighting for is the exact opposite, which is a party republic in which all are equal and none are more equal than anybody else.
30 seconds, Max.
Because fundamentally, democracy is when the governed govern themselves, and that's what we're all fighting for.
All right, great. Thanks, Max. So we are going to, I need to make it clear for starters that questions will come from the floor. And there's a very strange noise. I think somebody might need to mute themselves. Oh, it's gone there. Okay. So the questions will come from the floor and the chat will be after the break. For the next part of it, we're going to have a debate, sort of a fairly free-flowing debate between the three main speakers. And I think a good way to start it would be to say that, to ask whether any of the three main speakers have anything that they desperately want to respond to in terms of what other people have already said. So if you could indicate using digital hands, please, if that's you, that'd be really helpful. Okay, so all right. So Tina was the first one with her hand up. So let's go to Tina. If you could let us know straight off the bat who you're responding to, Tina, that would be really helpful. But obviously everyone will have time.
Roger, really, I was going to ask a couple of questions, but also Max, really. And I mean, Max touched on the fact that he thinks his proposal is probably not going to be heard or accepted, and I suspect the same will go for the kind of sortition that Roger talks about. Which actually, I was going to ask you, what do you mean by having a sortition which allows for the pluralism of presentations? I mean, that almost sounds like we get together, people who've shared similar political views get together to discuss beforehand, etc., and then decide amongst themselves who will present the views, etc., and who will move it, what kind of motion you put forward, which is, of course, what we'd be arguing for as well in terms of delegation and, you know, branches, collective power by the members. You know, I hear entirely what you're saying in terms of elections are a con in today's, you know, society. There's a con where every 5 years you can say yes or you choose between who's going to, you know, butcher the working class. The total con. It's not a free competition at all. It's a lie. But I think you're throwing out the baby a little bit with the bathwater if you then say we can't have any elections, any votes in our meetings, which I think is what you said. It's democracy is not elections, it's not voting. They're reactionary, revisionist. And I think, I mean, do you think even just for normal branch meetings, you know, when there's, I mean, like in Sheffield where we've got 200 people in a meeting, and we have to discuss what we're doing, isn't it? We have to discuss, we published an emergency resolution, an emergency motion on the conference plans, criticizing them, etc. How do you do that if you don't have proper voting? You know, how some people were against it, yeah, but the overwhelming majority wanted to get that resolution out to say we want a democratic launch conference. How do you do that if you don't have votes, if you don't actually say yes or no? Some of you are wrong, you know, some of you are wrong, but you're the minority. Fine, you had the chance to be heard. That's really important to hear people. But we also need to move forward and make decisions. Without voting, how do you do that in a democratic way? You know, without it becoming the minority is being shut up. The minority has to basically subordinate itself because, you know, you're just disrupting the proceedings. You know, you have to be able to express yourself and make decisions. And I don't understand how sortition can do that.
Is that to Max? Just for clarity, Tina, was that question
Well,
directed
to Roger.
towards?
Roger.
Okay.
Yeah, well, there's quite a lot there, Tina. So I think there's several different issues, so maybe I can take them in turn. I think in terms of who decides the agenda is a profound political problem which exists whether you have sortition or whether you have a voting system, as we probably all know. So we're dealing with something that is always going to be corruptible. And the question then is more of an issue of how we minimize the possibility of that corruption. And I think there's three ways in which it can be done through sortition. The first way is that there's a body which is separate from the political space, which is responsible for approximately being neutral in terms of selecting a diversity of views to be put to the sortition body. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it, which is the way I prefer, which is the people who decide who should speak are also selected by sortition, maybe with some technical advice. And the beauty of that is that if people did want to corrupt the process, it'd be very difficult because they couldn't get into the decision-making body and they couldn't get into the body that decides how to make the decisions either because of sortition. And the third way of doing it is to enable the sortition body itself to actually initiate their own proposals and the people who they want to see speak. So if they think someone's not being represented properly, then they can suggest that that group gets more time to speak. So none of those are uncorruptible, but then, you know, we're in the real world and there's major problems with voting systems leading to similar levels of corruption and bureaucracy, as I'm sure you know. As far as using sortition and voting is concerned, I think there's a bit of confusion that once the body which has been selected by sortition is constituted, then it's perfectly reasonable that that body is able to vote, assuming, of course, that there's been suitable amounts of deliberation and a plurality of inputs. So it's not saying voting is bad in every situation. What it's saying is is that we shouldn't vote people into the decision-making body, because that's very easily corruptible. But once they're in the decision-making body, then voting obviously makes sense. So to answer your question more concretely, if you have a membership, say in Bolton, you have 500 people, then it makes sense from a socialist point of view to use sortition to make decisions. For instance, 50 people are selected so that people, all the people in the membership, get an equal likelihood of being able to make decisions, including, for instance, working class people who are not confident or are not able to actually go to physical meetings, so that the meeting doesn't become more dominated, as you might say, by wealthier comrades or those with more education and confidence. So, but once you're in that sortition space, then obviously you're perfectly correct. A decision has to be made, and as long as there's a sortition assembly, then obviously a decision should be made, as I say, assuming that they've got a plurality of inputs and they've got long enough to deliberate, which I entirely agree with Max, by the way, isn't the case, as it would appear with your party. But that's another issue, if you see what I mean, for obvious reasons.
Max, do you want to come in, mate?
Yeah, if that's all right. Can you hear me?
Of course, I can hear you really loud and clear now.
Terrific. I just wanted to respond to a point that Roger brought up, about how if you had a branch that had only 50 people, then all 50 could be sortition to make decisions in that branch or whatever. At least I might have misunderstood you, Roger.
Yeah, I think you have. What I'm saying is, if the membership was 400 or 500, you could select by sortition 50 people to make the decisions, and then therefore you get an equitable distribution of different people, and rather than it being skewed through confidence, and other inequality sort of tendencies that you get in any branch system.
Okay, I'm still opposed to that. I believe that local meetings should be run under a all member meeting system, whereby essentially you would have one member, one vote. But the question of one member, one vote in the party is something that we all need to discuss, because it really matters how you define it. For the people at the top, and for an awful lot of people who are coming from a Labour background, one member, one vote essentially means plebiscitary democracy from home in front of your computer, and you press a button. You don't engage in any debates, you don't have discussions with other people or anything like that. My definition of one member, one vote is that it is an equal right to participate in decision making and democratic deliberations, right? And I think the best way of doing that is through all member meetings that anyone can turn up to. The problem is that if you do it your way of people being sortition, then essentially what you create is like a kind of temporary elite of decision makers inside local parties. Of course, they'll have been selected at random, right? But that's not always necessarily going to produce the best result, because, as Tina has pointed out, and as I pointed out earlier on, without those with strong views being in the room and presenting ideas and trying to win people over to those ideas, the sortition process is essentially rudderless. It's like I don't know, it's like a steamship without an engine flailing around in the water trying to find land. And that's fundamentally the problem with straight sortition, is that it sounds nice in theory, but in practice it empowers the people at the top, not the people at the bottom.
Yeah, if I can possibly just come back on that. With all
Can I just finish my sentence? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine.
I'm going to intervene there just really briefly. I'm going to say Max should finish his point, then Roger can come back, and then I think it might be good if Roger asked Tina a question. Does that make sense to everybody? Or Roger, do you not have anything to
Yeah, I'm
sort of?
sure I can find a question to ask it.
All right, great. Just kind of thinking about airtime. Okay.
Yeah, and then I'll shut up.
Yeah, no, just I mean, look, I'm ready to finish my part. I just wanted to say that the problem with straight sortition fundamentally is that it empowers those asking the questions, not those giving an answer to those questions. Because if I could put forward a proposal that the branch should stop having in-person meetings entirely, and you could have 50 people who are sortitioned, and they could go, well, um, this sounds all right because not everyone can make the meetings. Da, 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 da. But the real reason why I could be asking the question in the first place is because I don't want all member meetings. And the reason I don't want all member meetings, for example, is that they produce results I do not like. So instead, I prefer atomized voting at home. And that's the way I can then whip people via text message or via an email list or something like that. And then I am the local party dictator. That's basically the problem with sortition, is that without people being there in the room to challenge the question itself and why the question has been raised, you end up in a situation where the questioner is the one in command, not the demos.
Okay, Roger.
Yeah, so I think with genuine respect, Max, you're sort of combining an aristocratic argument with a revolutionary argument. Your latter argument is revolutionary because you quite rightly indicate that as soon as you atomize decision making, then you allow manipulation of power. I totally agree with you. The proposition of having a sortition system, as it's commonly understood, is that it has to be combined with substantial deliberation, not an atomized system. So that's the first thing, right? And I totally agree with you on that point. On your first point, however, I would say, without any doubt, what you're suggesting is an aristocratic argument, not a Republican argument. Because basically you're saying some people have better opinions than others, which may well be the case, of course, according to your, subjectivity. But the fact of the matter is, as soon as you allow self-selection in a system, then you allow hierarchy and corruption, because some people get to speak over other people. And this is sort of shown empirically, dare I say it, that it simply is not empirically the case that if everyone can turn up to a branch meeting, everyone can turn up with an equal amount of ability. That's simply not sustainable as an empirical observation, in the sense that some people don't have the money, some people don't have the confidence, some people are new, some people aren't politically sophisticated and such like. So the way, paradoxically, to create political education is actually the opposite of what you and Tina are saying, which is to maximize the probability that a wider range of people come into the political space so that they can participate in it and make decisions. And in my book, like, the best way to empower the powerless is to enable them to participate. And there's no better way of doing that than to use sortition rather than using methods which inevitably lead to some people, i.e. an elite, having more say than the average member. And that's the proposition, isn't it?
All right. I'm going to bring Tina back in now. And then, Max, if there's time, I reckon we've got 3 minutes left. I'll bring you back in. Thanks, Roger.
Well, I think, the basic problem is people are not equal. We want them to have equal rights, but people have different talents. I have, no talent for reading long books and retaining what I've just read. Other comrades much better at that. People have different talents. If I break my leg, I don't want an average, a sortition person to fix my leg. I want the best doctor. And I think that's the problem with sortition. It averages things out. It doesn't allow you to choose the best democratically, accountability. It doesn't allow us to say, we want this person to represent our branch. Somebody is chosen who we actually all think, not the best person to put our views forward. And all of us have been silenced. There's no chance for us to be heard at conference because we had no input into this decision making there. I think electing delegates in a democratic way, and I hear what you're saying about the loudest person, etc. There's ways you can do it via, a single transferable vote to at least ensure it's not one organization that runs it all. But electing delegates is the only way where we include everybody in the decision making, either because you become a delegate or you've had a chance to question and vote for the delegate. That's the only way to involve everybody. I mean, your way of describing, we have 500 people in the branch and 50 are allowed to make decisions. What about the other 450? That's extremely disillusioning. It's extremely demoralizing for those people who can't participate in the decision making. They haven't even got a chance. They might have something really interesting to say, really good to say, and instead we have people who are maybe, by chance, not those who make the best arguments. In terms of, I think we can always have hybrid meetings. That's no question. People can't come. They should be able to vote. But that's exactly the same thing. Everybody should be able to participate. And that's the most democratic way. And I think sortition is actually a way to have, not an elite, but a randomly chosen small section rather than everybody. As socialists, we want everybody to get involved and take charge of things and run society, all of us, not, some that have been randomly chosen.
All right, Max, 30 seconds.
Wonderful. Can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm. Go.
Wonderful. Right. So just to go back to what Roger said, I'm not going to touch on what Tina said because I've got so very little time.
20 seconds.
The argument I'm putting forward is the Republican argument. The argument you are putting forward is to empower an aristocracy, a nascent aristocracy, aka a bureaucracy of the people at the top, mainly around Jeremy Corbyn, who used to work in the leader's office. I believe that every cook can govern, right? But at this stage in popular development, they're not capable of doing so. It requires systematic political education, right? And systematic political education can only take place at meetings where a variety of views are heard that have been seriously considered.
All
What
right.
you are proposing will empower an elite.
Sorry, Max.
Simple as that.
Sorry to cut you off. All right. Right, it's time for everybody to take a break. Probably go to the loo, certainly in my case. Go and make a hot chocolate or something because it is cold tonight, surprisingly cold for the time of year. No Indian summer for us. Somebody might need to mute because there's a strange noise going on there. So we are going to have, I think, 20 minutes for people to go and just have a rest their eyes, rest their ears. Refresh themselves, a blute if necessary, and we'll also just reflect on whether they might change their minds on anything, reflect on anything that they might think needs clarifying, and just to gather their throats. And I think we're going to be put in breakout rooms for this, which might be useful, but don't feel you have to be in the breakout rooms. Sorry, somebody just telling me it's 15 minutes for the break. So yeah, go and do your thing, and I'll see you in 15. Thanks, everyone. Just FYI, everybody, if anyone's being sort of leery or abusive um, in one of the breakout rooms, which I think is highly unlikely, I think just people should just exit and report it to us. I can't imagine that's going to be a thing, but just in case, I think in terms of housekeeping, um, feel free to do that if you need to. Also, I'm going to indulge myself by saying hi to Joe Dukes, who's a long-time local friend and comrade. Hi, Joe. Up the Saints.
I'm just going to pop to the loo, but I don't know. We've got about 5 minutes left, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So, shall we close the rooms?
Yeah, I think we've got about another. Well, that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's
All right.
that's the time.
All right. 60 seconds. Well, rooms are closing. I wondered where you got to, Tom, but I saw you joined.
I was spying on the
Yeah.
breakout rooms just to make sure everyone was behaving themselves. So that was sort of even split between people who'd just gone off to make a cup of tea, like whole groups had gone off to make a cup of tea or whatever, and some people who were having really nice, respectful, comradely conversations. So, you know, either of those things are good. As people start filtering back, I am going to open the chat and see who is asking interesting things in the chat. I've got a really good sort of starter for 10, I think. I couldn't hear you just now, Tina, if you're still there. Do you want to try again? I
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear
Okay,
you now.
thank you.
I can hear you now. But hopefully people are just going to start filtering back soon. Hopefully I'm not going to have to sort of like run around the various breakout rooms telling people off and chivying them along. Maybe put the countdown music on like I used to when I was a primary school teacher. Hurry up children who are slow getting changed after PE.
You taught in a primary school? Oh, those poor children.
I know. I did at one point. I was allowed to run what was called philosophy club. There's an after school thing, which is more like sort of Marxism club, really. I make no apology for the social engineering of children in the Southampton area during the early to late 2010s. Just doing my bit. All right. Give me a thumbs up if you're sort of like prepared to carry on with the next part of the meeting, because I think we're sort of starting to get a bit. Yeah. Oh, loads of thumbs up. All right. So the question in the chat that was the most striking and potentially useful, I think, as far as I was concerned. Can't remember who asked it, but congratulations to you if it was you. Is where is the consensus between Roger, Tina, and Max? So I think that's a question that can be asked of all three of the main speakers. Like what are the points of agreement, and perhaps where might you be prepared to compromise? Go on then, Max. Your hand was the first to come up.
Wonderful. I think the consensus between us all is that we all believe that democracy is when the governed govern themselves. I think where we disagree is exactly how the governed govern themselves, and whether at this stage in the political development of the demos, they are actually truly capable of governing themselves. So, like I said, I believe every cook can govern, right? But without the right tools in the kitchen, they're never going to be able to bake a cake. And those tools are political education, education more widely in general. If we focus at the level of education in this country, particularly the education that's done through the school system, it's actually very limited. You go to school basically to become a good worker. That's the main motivation behind the main drive of the schooling system, right? It's not so that you can run society, it's so that society can, or not even society, so that the capitalists can run you. And so, yeah, I think that's the big difference between myself, Tina, and Roger. We all want democracy, and we all want the governed to govern themselves, but exactly what that would look like, we differ on. So,
Okay, Tina, your hand is up. Do you want to come back on that?
I agree with quite a bit of that. I think for me, it's really important that we build now and behave now in the way that we want to go on. So if we're saying, there is change is possible, a revolution is possible. We can overthrow this system. It's not natural. We don't have to just take it. We can organize and do it, take it over ourselves and govern ourselves. I think we kind of all sort of agree on that. I'm not sure if Roger thinks of himself as a revolutionary. I think he does. I think we can agree on that. I think we agree that we are despairing about the state of the left. I think we're all quite agreed that the left as it is not fit for purpose. It doesn't cohere properly. It doesn't debate. It doesn't argue. It's either sects on one side or sort of social reforms on the other, reform laborism, loyalty to the constitution, or sects that don't allow disagreement, that don't allow anybody to speak up. I think we're all fed up with that and we want to change things for the better, but we have different ways of doing that. And I think, by building now in the way that we want to go on, I think we do have to involve everybody actively all the time, and not, randomly this month it's your decision, next time it's the other one. And crucially, accountability. I think Roger's system of sortition does not make these participants accountable to anybody. And I think that's really important. The 6 MPs who are running, the 5 MPs who are running your party at the moment, who are they accountable to? Their conscience, right? They should be accountable to the bloody party, to us as members. They should be there as representatives of your party and not just individuals. We have to keep them, they should argue what we tell them to argue. They shouldn't come back and say, oh, I did this and this. Did you? No, we should ask them and we should tell them what to do. So accountability is a really important thing. And I don't think you can, sortition delegates, you cannot make them accountable because, they weren't chosen. It was a total accident that they're in that position. It'd be extremely unfair to make them accountable to the other members because they didn't put themselves forward. They can do whatever they want. Accountability in socialism as the method to go to socialism is extremely important. And I think we might disagree on that.
Roger, did you want to come in on that? Sorry. People who are indicating from the floor, it would be really helpful. I think you might have missed me saying this because people were still off, like going to the loo and making cups of tea and what have you. It would be really helpful if you could stick your questions in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've already gone through the ground of me challenging that delegate systems are not actually democratic in actuality because of structural differences in terms of confidence and ability to attend and such like. So I don't think Max and Tina have sort of directly dealt with that criticism, but I'm not going to go into it in more detail. I'll take a different tact. So a different tact here is that maybe delegate branch systems did have their day in Fordist society. In other words, mass society, when the working class had a tradition of meeting together in large numbers. However, it should be fairly obvious to everyone that in a postmodernist neoliberal society, working class solidarity has been decimated for all the reasons we know. And in order to bring people back into some culture of collectivity, we're not going to do it by banging on about old modernist ways of getting people to do things together. Whether it's sympathetically, attractive from a theoretical point, it's empirically illiterate to expect lots of people to go to old style branch meetings and all the rest of it. So I think obviously that's a negative thing to say, but I think there is something positive to say, that there are pathways to mass participation and therefore political education, and they come through the design of sociability. In other words, to create things where people enjoy the experience, like parties, gigs, banquets, the things which in the 19th century they used, to bring people into the socialist movement. And these things need to be attended to. And the other thing, of course, is sortition, which is to select people who wouldn't have the confidence to come into the space and to experience what it is to actually have political power. And I think there's overwhelming empirical evidence that this is the way people become radicalized and become politically confident, not through top-down political education, which is the default mode of old-style Marxism. And, this debate's been going on for a long time. If people know Paulo Freire, for instance, the Brazilian Marxist, you'll know that there's a big difference between the old banking approach. In other words, the people who supposedly have objective Marxist knowledge tell everyone what the deal is, and the notion that people can learn through participatory education. So there's plenty of old debates resurfacing here. And I think it's good, obviously, to have a pluralism within the revolutionary space, which is hopefully what's happening in this meeting.
Okay, thanks all three of you. I'm going to take one question just from hands up on the floor, because I think I was a bit late in saying, could you please put your questions in the chat? And then I'm going to take one from the chat as well. Part of the reason I'm asking people to put their questions in the chat is I am trying to filter out the classic left-wing guy at a meeting thing of this is more of a comment than a question. The notorious old chestnut that is, this is more of a comment than a question. But I'm going to go to Leo Watkins now. So I'm going to ask...
I don't mind people making comments. I don't think they just have to ask questions.
Yeah,
I think that's fair enough.
I guess, but it's just sort of a shortage of time, isn't it? If we were sort of able to be here all night, it'd be slightly different. But yeah, so Leo, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. I have a couple of questions, which I realize is sort of between the one question and the more than a comment than a question.
We'll see.
I'll try and make them brief. So the first question is for Tina, which is basically, even if I agree with your point about we need delegates ultimately to turn up at this conference, how do we select the delegates without branches? And when we don't yet have collectively agreed procedures for constituting branches or choosing delegates at those branches, aren't those basically rules that we need a founding conference to decide? So is it possible that we say we need sortition for the founding conference, the founding conference creates an interim constitution, and then we come back in a year's time with delegates chosen by properly constituted democratic branches, and have a delegate conference to revisit that interim constitution? Because the likelihood is we're going to learn things about how the constitution works in practice after the first year or two of its existence that we're not going to know at the beginning. And then just to Roger quickly, my question would be, why does sortition abolish these inequalities that you talk about? Because, for example, who has the free time and money to go to Liverpool for just one day to participate in the sortition conference? There are inequalities there. And secondly, in terms of the people who turn up, amongst the randomly selected delegates, there will be enormous inequalities in confidence, in speaking in front of thousands of people, inequalities of status and fame. And what's in practice, I think, going to happen is because so many people are going to turn up, the average amount of time that each person has to speak will be so short that the people most able to influence the outcome of the vote will be people with the communicative ability to reach thousands of delegates outside the conference process. And that will be Jeremy Corbyn and other famous names who have thousands and thousands of Twitter followers or access to a mailing list. Anyway, so the last thing I just want to say is, could we maybe focus a bit of the discussion on what the concrete proposals for the Liverpool conference are? I found the discussion so far very interesting in terms of the general theoretical question of sortition versus delegates. But we have this set of proposals in front of us, which even people who like sortition, I think, might find very problematic and want to change. And I think it's worth thinking about what those proposals are and how we could do better than them.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks, Leo. I'm going to take one more question. It would be good maybe if the three main speakers who are being addressed here could make sort of a mental or physical note of the questions that Leo just asked. I am then I'm going to take one from the chat, which I'm just going to read out, which is about disciplinary procedures. Would the panel support a sortition-derived board that would act in an advisory capacity on things such as member expulsion, disciplinary cases, etc.? So in whatever order our three main speakers see fit, could you
Can we take a
please...
few more, maybe, Tom? I think we could maybe
what
have
I
a
will
couple
do
more.
is, while you're responding, I will take a few more from the chat and then read them out when the three of you have finished responding to the first two. So Max, I'm going to go to you first because you've indicated.
Yeah, so on Leo's point about the inequalities of those attending the conference, one of the things that I proposed when I put forward the argument for Sortition Plus was that there would need to be a travel bursary, accommodation bursary, and that there would have to be free professional childcare available to all those who have been sortitions so that they can fully participate in the day's events. Obviously, also, food would need to be provided and everything like that. That would resolve that angle of it. As to the other question, I think we need to split what we mean by like disciplinary mechanisms, right? Because when it's a question of political discipline, obviously that needs to be made by representatives who are accountable. When it's for essentially, behavioural grievance issues, harassment issues, or whatever, I have been won over by the arguments of others that should be handled by a jury of that person's peers, essentially. So through a sortition position.
Who's next? Who would like to go next in response to that? Tina?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think, as I said in my intro, sortition can play a role in that. So that's a good way to divide it up, as Max did. How do we select delegates? Although we don't have branches, I try to say that the fact that we don't have branches is on purpose. I think they've done it like that on purpose. They're not handing over data, or you could say there's problems with data protection, etc. You could easily forward details of meetings of the dozens of proto branches, to make sure everybody in the area knows about them. You could have done it. You could still do it. We could still elect democratically accountable delegates at this time. I think there are plenty of proto branches already. I think the danger, if we say, oh, this time is now a problem, the danger will be we'll set a precedent. The danger will be we have a sortition, in a bad way sortition. Roger, disagrees with some of it. And this becomes enshrined. It worked so well last time. Let's do it again next time. I think we should continue to fight back. And I did actually want to pick up Roger on something he said. And I think that's a interesting thought. What do we do if nothing changes for the better, if the plans stay as bad as they are? I mean, I think there's various ways we should think about how to protest. Should we try and get up at the beginning of the conference and say, this is not good enough, we need a different agenda? Should we have our own democratic counter meeting at the same time, properly democratically constituted conference that actually discusses meaningful, etc.? What should we do? I mean, we can put out resolutions, etc., and we should campaign for that way. Maybe, Roger, you have another way into the levels of power. I don't know, but what do we do? I think it's actually important that we discuss if it stays as undemocratic as the plans are now, we shouldn't take it lying down. We shouldn't just say, oh, well, that's how it is. No.
Roger, I'm going to go back to you, and then I'm going to go to another couple of questions from the floor, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah, so just quickly, obviously, I totally agree with Max and Tina in terms of, people need to be paid if they don't have the money to go to a conference for obvious reasons, whether it's a delegate system or a sortition system. So that deals with that inequality issue. I think there's a confusion, which Max has rightly pointed out, between what you might call, well-organized sortition according to the best modern practice and what your party seems to be developing, which is a form of what I would call manipulatable direct democracy. And more concretely, what I mean is all modern sortition designs hardly ever have more than 1,000 people in them, more often than not just several hundred, so that you can, because you're still statistically going to get a selection of people. Obviously, it becomes a lot more unwieldy the more people you have, and therefore more manipulatable, as Max has said. And the other obvious thing that needs to change then is there needs to be more time, again, as Max said. So those are two things we can all agree on, is in so much as there is sufficient sortition, then it should be less than 1,000 people, which doesn't mean other people can't participate in input, of course, but the decision makers needs to be a smaller number, and they need a minimum of half a week to sort of consider even some of the issues. Like modern sortition practice usually works over a number of weekends, for instance. So that hopefully could move things forward a bit.
All right, thanks everybody. A really, I think in a good way, quarrelsome question that I've just spotted in the chat is, and I'm paraphrasing here, and I apologise for not giving the comrade who is responsible for this one their flowers by reading out their name, just because the chat's gone kind of a bit crazy, so it's hard to keep up. But if this is you, then well done and thank you. If we don't end up feeling that we have any agency in the founding conference, do we need to mobilise opposition to the conference and deny it legitimacy? And if so, how do we do this?
Want to ask take some more people from the floor, maybe?
Yeah, sure. If you want to, I'd really like to be somebody who, I'm just looking at hands up. Who are the people with the hands up? I would like to have a woman, but I also am sort of like slightly, I need to be careful about presuming anyone's gender based on their name. So let's go to, all right. Let's go to Yanni G. Just waiting for Yanni to unmute. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Could be Janny, I suppose.
Yeah, can you hear?
Yep.
Okay, so my point is that you need to have policies that work and things that have been proven to work in the recent decade. I'm an old road protester, so I was on road protests on the M11 in London, Twyford Down, all of that. What you need is something that works, and what works is the strategies that were introduced with XR that then evolved into Insulate Britain, that then went to Just Stop Oil. A lot of these meetings that took place in these environments were based on different people having different roles. So a kind of sortition, but I think we're getting hung up over this term sortition, which is slightly annoying. I think the main point is that you need to have something that's going to work. And as far as I can see, the only person in the room who's talking about that is Roger Hallam.
Okay. Okay, so that's, I think, two. So let's give speakers time to respond. And I think sort of from that point onwards, we need to start thinking about wrapping up really, because I'm very conscious about overrunning because people might have to put their children to bed and things like that. Maybe one more after this one. So in response to those two questions, let's let everybody in. Max has got his hand up, and I'm going to go to you, Roger.
Wonderful. So to the first question, it is highly unlikely that, you know, we're going to get them to change their minds. I think this entire system for the conference was set up so that the result was predetermined, basically. There's several motivating factors for that. There is a drive by the people around Corbyn for it to essentially be a coronation, and that that he will then be leader of the party for God knows how long. One of them said to me a few weeks ago that because obviously they're all so focused on personalities rather than politics, that Zara Sultana just needs to accept that Jeremy Corbyn's going to be leader for 2 years and then he'll step down and give her a free run. It's not in his power to make those kind of decisions. And the real reason why they're pushing for that is because it will then empower the people around him. They can then give themselves incredibly well-paid jobs, over 100 grand a year or anything like that. And then they're there then in those jobs for life, right? They become the bureaucracy like we saw in the Labour Party. And they will act exactly the same because bureaucratic power corrupts. So as to the conference itself, due to the size, it would be incredibly difficult to actually organise outside of the conference for a couple of reasons. One, because how are you going to talk to 13,000 people in 2 days? And you would need thousands of people there, well organised, to make those arguments. And two, for a conference of this size, it's highly likely that the old bill will be present. I don't know if any of you have ever been to the Labour Party conference, but there's always a couple of coppers outside the gates holding machine guns. And for a conference this size, I would imagine it would be the case. So if we tried to storm the conference, for example, well, we'd probably get shot or at the very least arrested. And the laws governing that kind of things at conference are also tied to the Terrorism Act. So we'd all be labelled terrorists as well. So, which is obviously not true. So there's no real opportunity to change what is going to happen. It's being presented as a fait accompli, and so we need to be looking at long-term strategy rather than short-term strategy. As to the second question, I don't really know how to respond. I'll be perfectly honest. I didn't pay much attention because it seemed more like a puff piece for Roger than an actual question. Anyway, goodbye.
Thanks, Max. All right, Roger, you were the next to indicate, so I'll go to you and then to Tina.
Yeah, well, I'm more than happy, Max, to acknowledge this. I don't think I do have all the answers. None of us do, obviously, and we're all fumbling along to a certain extent. So that's that point. I think what Max is saying is right, that there needs to be like a long-term strategy here. You know, what is extremely exciting about the present moment is the fact that 800,000 people have signed up for a fundamentally different political and economic system. And that's the real news here, not the short-term messings about of a particular group of people at the centre of your party. You know, whether they're, you know, using the best of their intentions or not doesn't particularly concern me. What concerns me is to develop a strategy of popular mobilisation in this country. And my proposition here is that sortition is a central part of creating that popular mobilisation because of its ability to bring in demographics and cultural groups and age groups and all the rest of it that are pluralistic. In other words, people who simply will not, with all due respect to Tina and Max, will not in a million years go to a branch meeting. It's just not going to happen. Which isn't to say branches shouldn't exist. That's what I'm arguing for, is a pluralism of approach, so that as many people as possible can find pathways into spaces where they can feel empowered and politically educated, as the phrase goes. And that comes through assemblies, it comes through door knocking and surveys, it comes from cultural and social events. And most of all, I suppose it comes from freeing people to develop forms of collectivity that come out of their particular culture and experience, and not predetermining what their form of political activity should be. And that's a big challenge, right, to the Marxist space, with all due respect. But we're not going to get anywhere unless we have the people. So we can have as great policies and strategies as we like, but we don't have popular participation, then, as we all know, we're just talking to the choir. And I'm not saying for a minute I know exactly how it should be done, but what I am saying is we need to relax, out of the old methodologies of traditional Marxist practice, because, dare I say it, Marxism isn't intrinsically a branch and delegate sort of ideology, is it? Things change, history happens. Isn't that the basis of the Marxist approach? We do have agency to create our future, and it doesn't have to be what happened in 1910.
Okay, thanks, Roger. Tina, and then we're going to move to questions from the floor. I'm going to take two more. I'm going to take questions from Hannah and Jill. So if you comrades could be ready with your questions when I come to you. Tina, take it away.
Counter argument, Roger. Don't know if you know much about the German Social Democratic Party in the late 19th century. That was a mass working class party, and they did, listening to you about the culture and clubs and stuff, that's how they organized. It became a mass working class party by reading clubs, cycle clubs, they went on holiday together, forest parties, etc. It was a real party of the working class that organized the working class in everything. It built a separate culture, a working class culture, which had fun, cultural events. There weren't film showings then, but, we should do stuff like that, film showings as well. Involve people on a number of levels. I have great sympathy for what you're saying there. But I don't think we should then throw out the baby with the bathwater and say, bugger branch meetings. We don't need that. I think you have to have all of that, because for decision making, if we want to play a role in how your party is run and what our MPs are doing, we also have to have structures where we come to decisions, don't we? And where we are able to put forward views and discuss them and have decision-making structure. So we should go back for a bit, further back, not 2010 or 1910, but 1900s. And that was a very different culture. And I think that's important because it builds up our counter structures, and it makes us into a collective force that then the vision of socialism actually becomes much closer, because we are starting to organize already. On that question of how we're going to do it, direct action or whatever, storming the gates. Yeah, I think we might get shot. That's true. Or not even that. It could be still, a bit unpleasant. But I do think we should think along those lines of politically delegitimizing conference as it's happening. We can reach people, of course. We have done it at the Labour Party conference. I'm standing outside for 6-7 years every year. Labour against the witch hunt, etc. Defend the left. Handing out leaflets, handing out daily bulletins, handing out Palestine flags, handing out red flags. You can speak to a lot of people who are going in, and I would have thought they're quite receptive to it. But I do think we should think a bit more along the lines of what Rafael was suggesting as well. A counter. Maybe he wasn't saying that, I'm saying that, a counter event, perhaps, rather than storming that one. I mean, it all depends, and we should stay flexible. If it turns out 200 of us are in there, have been chosen because there's actually a very small sortition pool. It might look like that actually not very many people are joining up now because it's been so chaotic. Or thousands of us in there, organized lefties, etc. We could do something, actually. If not, then we should think about doing something outside. But politically delegitimizing the conference is very important. And who knows, Sarah Sultana, Salma Yaqub, they might join us outside. They are, I mean, from what Zara was saying, she's very unhappy with the way things have been going. Why not, she might come and address our meeting. We have to think longer term. This party hopefully will last a few years, decades, hopefully, that we build up a democratic polls, socialist polls, locally, regionally, nationally. So we should keep an eye out, but also think wide.
All right, thanks, Tila. I'm going to go to Jill, and then I'm going to go to Hannah. Time's getting on a little bit. Oh, Roger, I thought you were leaving.
Yeah,
did you want to come back?
unfortunately, I thought we were finishing at 1:15, and I do, dare I say, have another meeting. I'll get into trouble. But so I just wanted to thank everyone for having me speak, and hopefully it was comradely enough in my criticisms.
Yeah, I think it's been really generative and good. So thank you for being here.
Thanks, Roger.
And best of luck, everyone. I'll see you again.
Right.
Bye, Roger.
Cheers. All right, Jill, take it away, and then we'll go to Hannah.
So I wanted to put this a bit more in a wider and context. So I was on a Zoom call with some academics, and they said that British politics is breaking up and has been for quite a while. And I also met my neighbour today who has given 10 quid to your party. Definitely not politicised or interested in anything at all. I think some completely mad to get arrested for Palestine action. So put it in context, we have a political system which has never been so much disillusionment. We have a political system that's breaking up anyway. We have all the problems with extreme poverty globally, nationally, with the climate crisis. All of these things are happening. And what I'm hearing is that you want to create a party that's exactly the same as all the others, in the sense that it has this sort of hierarchical top-down structure. I understand that you have to have a certain amount of hierarchy, but what I'm interested in is the people who are not political, who will, as Roger said, not go to political meetings. Otherwise, what happens, it tends to be the same old, same old. So if you're not going to have sortition, my question is, how are you going to reach those people who are the mass of people in Britain who are completely disillusioned with the current system? In my lifetime, we've had ping-pong politics between Labour and Conservatives all my life. I'm 70. My MP Carla Denyer was my first elected representative I actually voted for. So there is a lot of disillusionment and there is a lot of problems. So I'm thinking, if this party really wants to get to power, then there has to be a change of approach. There has to be not a reproduction of what we've already got. I mean, I'm looking to the Scandinavians, even if it was something like that. They have the Green Reds. They have 9 parties. One of them is Green Reds. There needs to be a completely new systemic change. And I don't hear much sound of that happening, apart from sortition. So I'd love to hear what the delegates have to say.
Okay, so the question in there is around how the democratic processes is going to make this a different party from Labour. Is that? Sorry, Jill, you muted again.
Yeah, I think we understood it.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to go to the next question from Hannah, and then I'm going to have responses. I'm going to ask beg the remaining 2 main speakers to try and keep their responses to make them as brief as possible. Then we're going to move to closing remarks, and then we can all go and make a hot chocolate and get ready for bed. Hi,
Thanks,
Hannah.
everyone. Yeah, two questions. One is, has there ever been a political party anywhere in the world at any point in time that has been started by this method? I am actually not aware of that. So that's the first question to you. And I know, like, we are really focusing on the conference, and I think most of the time actually we spent talking about the processes and so on and so forth. But actually, we've not really talked about things outside of that. We've talked a lot about the processes and how things are going, but like, what about stuff like community wealth building, about getting people involved locally? That's kind of, I think, where the scope is. And is your party going to be effectively an electoral vehicle, which is what seems to be talked about a lot here? Or are we looking at something else which is actually different? So just reflecting on Jill's point, because a lot to me of what's being said here is sort of like, we can talk a lot about the whole process, but we're still kind of doing the same thing, like more or less. I know there's differences within that. So yeah, the question of what outside of this are people doing or thinking about? So those two questions, really. I'm very interested in the first one as well, the answer to that.
All right. Thanks, Hannah. Okay. Who would like to go first? Max, you still awake, mate?
Yeah, I'm alive and kicking.
All right. Okay, let's go to Max because Tina spoke before you the last time.
Okie doke. So I'll sort of combine Jill and Tina's question because they were quite interlinked. So I believe that the type of party that we need to build is a party republic. That requires a radical break with Labourism, right? The Labour Party is structured very much like capitalism. You have a small minority at the top who are the party elite, MPs, bureaucrats, and so on. And then you have the overwhelming mass of people, members, who from time to time are asked what their opinion is, but in reality, their opinion doesn't really matter that much. And they get to elect who will manage them, essentially. The question facing your party in that sense is, how can we reflect in the structures, practices, and modes of democratic behaviour the type of society that we aspire to build, not the one that we come from, right? And at present, very few people have put that question to the forefront. One of the things that I'm deeply concerned about is that this will just be yet another electoral project. Do not get me wrong. Standing in elections is important, but it would be wrong to make that the sole sort of measurement of success in the new party. We can't be defined by elections alone. It's the actual organisation of working class people on the ground that's going to matter here. And the problem is that the situation we find ourselves in today is kind of like what Tina mentioned earlier on with the early years of the SPD in Germany, right? The working class as a class in and for itself doesn't really exist in Britain anymore. Working class identity is strong, but it's not always actually reflective of material reality. And you see this all the time in the newspapers, for example, when they talk about working class millionaires. I'm sorry, if you're a millionaire, you're not a member of the working class, right? And so the working class has been decimated by what we're now coming up to, 45 years of Thatcherism? And so the task really facing the party now is that process of class formation. And if it puts that on the back burner and just focusing on electoralism alone, it's doomed from the off. The struggle we're facing right now with this party is whether it's going to be born for life or marked for death. And the problem is the way things are going, it's marked for death. And we all need to fight tooth and nail against that. So I know I said earlier about a party republic, and that means a party where the members of the ruling class are their own organisation, and an organisation that counterbalances the necessity of some degree of centralisation at a national level with high, meaningful autonomy and self-government at the level of local parties. Leadership is fundamentally a two-way street from above and from below, in constant democratic tension with one another, because that's the only way we can keep each other open and honest. And my fear right now is that as things are going, leadership is very much going to be a one-way street, and the party will really be nothing more than a fan club for MPs and councillors. And from time to time, we will be allowed to intervene and say our point, but actual meaningful participation in party life will be decided from above. So that's the struggle facing us right now. I'm not sure in the short term what the immediate solution to that problem is, but I think that it's through conversations like this that that such a strategy for the future can be defined.
All right,
Thanks very
cheers,
much.
Max. Yeah, thanks, mate. Okay, on to Tina.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is kind of us summing up anyway, isn't it? So because we've gone now 2 hours, so I
Let
think we
me,
can just say
Max,
something.
are you happy for that to be your closing remark? Is that all right?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Thank you. Thank you,
Well,
comrade. Tina, on to you. Try and keep it to like 2-3 minutes if you possibly
yeah,
can.
I mean, Jill asked an interesting question. What do you want to be like all the other parties, top down, hierarchical, etc.? Well, no, obviously not. That's why we're doing this, aren't we? There's not been a political party for some time, especially not the Labour Party, of course, if we mean that is democratic throughout, that is bottom up, where the members take all the decisions and decide who represents them, where the members hold their MPs accountable, and where the members, decide the policy and can make alternative proposals, etc. That's not existed like that, as far as I know, not on the Labour left anyway, not on the none of the Labour Party, for sure. I mean, there's been attempts with the early CPGB, but even that wasn't particularly democratic. With faction rights, where platforms can get together, argue their case democratically, try to change policy, etc., where the whole left is involved, the whole working class gets involved. That's the kind of party we are fighting for, and that needs accountability. And I make that point again, sortition is not accountable. People chosen by a sortition cannot be held accountable. It would be deeply unfair to them. So they are individuals, whereas we need to build up our collectivity. We need to discuss and organize together to build actually now for socialism, which is the collectivity, us running things together. That doesn't have to be a replication of the Labour Party. That would be the worst possible thing. I mean, anybody who's been a member of the Labour Party and has gone to any CLP meeting, oh my God, you're never so bored out of your mind as in those bureaucratic, horrible meetings. This is not what we're trying to do. Some people might want to do it. Some people might want to recreate the Labour Party. Perhaps Jeremy Corbyn wants to recreate the Labour Party. He certainly hasn't broken from Labourism and the loyalty to the Constitution. But we have to fight for something better. But we are swimming in this pond. This is 800,000 people, maybe more or less. We need to, make the best of it and fight as hard as we can to make this democratic and accountable. So, has any party ever existed that with sortition, not that I know of, that used that? I know Podemos experimented, in the name of doing it all different and OMOV, etc. And they had a lot of OMOV voting, etc. And then they joined the government, and then they started betraying the working class. And now they're buggered, they're nowhere. This is not a recipe that saves you from anything. It doesn't save you from becoming right wing. It doesn't save you from betraying the working class. Quite the opposite. I think it makes it almost voting and sortition, unfortunately, makes the bureaucracy stronger. It doesn't make the grassroots stronger. It leaves the grassroots powerless and atomized. And that is, I think, where I have a real problem. MPs should be accountable to the membership. Parliament, absolutely. We should use Parliament like the SPD did as a platform. Use it to tell the world what you believe in, not so much in, we want to run the government. I think they should be really careful running capitalism, running this system. Can you imagine the kind of decisions you have to take. I don't think your party should aim for government. I think your party should aim for opposition, a strong opposition as we can, using parliament as a platform to make our case. Claire Daly, funny politics in some bits. Brilliant, though, what she did in the European Parliament, using these, while people shouting her down. She used her little videos to argue for Palestine and against the Ukraine war. Brilliant. That's the kind of parliamentarians we want. A bit more accountable to the membership. She wasn't accountable particularly, but that's what you use Parliament for. I don't think we should try to run British capitalism. Oh my God, what a disaster that would be. The kind of things you would have to do. No, we oppose it. We should oppose it as strongly and as effectively as we can.
All right. Thank you very much,
just
Tina.
interject very quickly.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
All I was going to say is here, Tina, here. You
Yeah.
described the task
Right.
ahead of us far better than I could have. Well done, sister.
Well, what do you know? We've
Oh,
managed
bless.
to end on a point of consensus. We've not had, well, a bit of like really nice tub thumping towards the end there, which it's very welcome. We have had a really robust intellectual debate. We've had some really excellent contributions from the floor, and generally, exclusively really, a very comradely and I think or hope generative discussion. So thank you to everybody who's given up a really quite big chunk of their evening to participate, or at least to sort of listen to this debate. Thanks to the three main speakers as well, and thanks to the various people who had the conviction and the energy to organise this. There's a lot of sort of people grafting behind the scenes for this. All right, so
hopefully the first of a few of such sessions. Thank you,
fingers
Tom.
crossed. Yeah, like I think we should definitely do it again. So I'm going to bring the call to you now. So thank you to everybody. Good night and solidarity. Bye bye.
Thank you.